I think that we certainly can. It's something that it's interesting you asked this. We just ran an analysis. We were looking at search trends on Google across some of our competitors, Paula's Choice, List, CeraVe, La Roche-Posay, kind of like across price points. And you notice everyone starting to decline across the board. Everyone's declining a bit. Well, how do we maintain? How do we decline a little bit less?
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives, a podcast by Noibu, where we explore the elite strategies and cutting-edge insights with our expert guests. Get ready to propel your e-commerce business to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert's Perspective. Joining us today, we have Alexis Katsafanas, all the way over from New York. Welcome, Alexis.
Thanks, Kaylin. Good to be here.
Awesome. So just taking a look at your LinkedIn and doing some research ahead of time, see that you're in charge of the Unilever Prestige portfolio. You've been at Amazon, some other brands before. So maybe start off by walking us through your customer or your journey rather, and through all these different types of brands.
Yeah, definitely. So my career actually began in the world of brick and mortar retail as a buyer for Nordstrom department stores. And at that time, brick and mortar was still a significant portion of their business. So I was mainly focused on walking the floors, talking to customers, understanding what products they wanted to see from which brands. And that led me to a little stint with an internal innovation team. The Nordstrom family wanted to group some folks together to kind of figure out what does the future of shopping at Nordstrom stores look like. And during that project, I started getting more involved with our omni-channel retail presence. And essentially, I was flying to New York and speaking with brands, convincing them to give us a ton of samples for free to program this showrooming concept where customers could come into our stores, try on every brand that they've ever seen on the internet and loved, every size, every color, touch it, feel it, fall in love with it, and then it would be shipped to their doorstep. And so through that project, I started getting more interested in this world of e-commerce and this idea of things just showing up at your doorstep, which sounds hilarious to say out loud right now because that is the world we live in. But it really wasn't during my stint at Nordstrom. So I moved into their digital merchandising department, and that's where I became obsessed with this idea of customer intention. We are blessed to see every piece of data through heat maps, through click-through rates, conversion. I know exactly why someone came to the site, what they were looking for, what they checked out with. And I started to run with that. And I eventually moved over to Nike, which if you'll remember, around 2020, Nike was starting to pull out of retail because they really wanted to bring Nike customers back to their own channels. And so my remit at Nike was to build a social commerce app that was net new. It wasn't Nike, it wasn't sneakers. That was geared towards Gen Z because Urban Outfitters and ASOS, they were doing incredible things with Gen Z. Nike was their number one brand, but less than 40% of Gen Z consumers were shopping on Nike-owned channels. And so we played with gamification. We built chatbots. We had leaderboards, tickers, ways for customers to get engaged with each other. And that was probably the role where I started to realize, am I a founder? Am I a startup person? I love this. We were a 6-person team building a brand new app to Nike that we eventually then sold pieces of back into the business that you see in the sneakers app today, you see in the Nike app today. And that's when I moved over to Daily Harvest in New York City, direct-to-consumer food subscription model, leading their e-commerce team, really helping them figure out how do we reach more customers? We migrated their platform over to Shopify. We helped build better internal tools and systems. And then I did the most hilarious thing was pivot from startup to giant behemoth corporation, which is Amazon. Because sometimes if you can't beat them, you join them. You got to learn what's going on in the inside. And that was really interesting for me. And it also was just not quite the right fit for my personality of, I like this idea of founder startup world. I like to test and learn. I'm not always great with rules, restrictions, solid processes that I can't implement, build upon, or ruin and start over, build from the ground up. And so that's when I made the leap over to Unilever Prestige. My role at Unilever Prestige is unique because it's almost like a consultant We have 10 brands within our portfolio. In 2014, Unilever embarked on a journey to kind of tap into what they perceived to be the fastest growing market, which was premium beauty. And they bought over 10 years, 10 brands. And we let those brands own and operate their own businesses. We love for them to keep their unique point of views and sensibilities and what makes each and every one of them meaningful to a consumer. But we also have this central team, myself, who helps oversee their businesses and make sure that they're making better decisions for direct to consumer and also Amazon. So that is what I am doing today and how I got here.
That's really cool. And I mean, obviously you have a ton of experience from Nordstrom to, well, like startups to kind of somewhere in the middle to Amazon, now at Unilever. Maybe talk me through having all this different type of experience. What are some of the kind of non-negotiable principles that you've seen in e-com that kind of apply across the board from startup to scale up?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is having a customer first mindset. And my personal mantra, to be fair, has always been meet your customers where they're at. And that started early days at Nordstrom. And I think we're seeing that happen today with some really unique partnerships that have popped up even in just the last 2 years from brands that you've never expect to be in certain places. And maybe it's a little bit of a head scratch. I'm thinking about Sephora's partnership with Instacart. And I think that goes to show that you have to think about the customer before anything else. And sometimes you have to put your ego aside to serve them, like especially for our brands being in the luxury space. We want to remain luxury, but we also need to show up for people who need a toner and a moisturizer. And maybe they're shopping at Target and Instacart. And how could we get them on Tatcha.com? So that's definitely first and foremost. And then I would say experimentation and culture of learning, utilizing A/B testing to continuously improve and scale strategies. I love to test and test and test again. And if it worked, I'm all about making it 1% better. And so I think that there's ways to do that that are simple, and there are ways to do that that are more complex. And that is dependent on industry and channel. I'm thinking about Amazon versus a startup like Daily Harvest, where we might call a couple customers and offer them a gift card to give us insights. You know what I mean? It's the way in which you do that is different, but the ethos is the same. And then I would say probably data-driven decision making, is the third pillar here, that across channels, across industries, food, fashion, big company, small company, you have to leverage analytics to track performance. I think, especially in marketing, everyone thinks they're a marketer. And I mean no shade by that. It's the truth, right? You look at something, you're like, oh, I could have told that story better. Sometimes it's just, you can't be subjective and you need the data to gut check you and tell you if this is the thing that the customer needs or it's just the thing that you wish they needed.
Where have you seen, if ever, where making data-driven decisions has actually been the wrong move? Like, do you think it's always in the data, or do you think that sometimes you can kind of miss the trees in the forest when you're looking too deep into the data?
I'm so glad you asked this question. I saw this a lot in my early career in fashion, because what happens in the fashion business is you have an item that sells, and then next year you want to comp your item. So you're always looking to your like item to comp sales performance, sell through. You're looking at it for pricing. But the data doesn't understand trends. It doesn't understand culture. So a like item from last year might be totally irrelevant the coming year because of whatever's happening in the market. And so that's where you have to balance your, like, maybe you would say gut intention, but I think it's also just an understanding of what's happening in the world with what the data knows to be true. And I also think we're seeing that play out a little bit right now in what's going on in the AI space and generative AI, and how we can use some of these tools in our businesses to make better decisions. And it's like, yes, and do they understand fully like the voice and tone and the culture and the way in things need to change? I'm not sure. I think that they're going to get there, and they'll probably get there faster than some of us. But to your point, yes, you have to have a strong gut feeling and intention. You have to be staying on top of culture and at the pulse of what's going on with your customers and in their lives. And in a way, you need to anticipate their needs before you even have data to tell you that that's the correct thing to do. And I have a million examples of that. But once you do it, then it's like, all right, let the data tell you if that was the right or wrong thing,
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm curious, you folks went down the luxury path, you went through acquiring different businesses, and now you kind of sit as like an advisor to the brands. I have personal experience with the LVMH portfolio, the Richemont portfolio, the Hanes brands, and everyone has a different opinion on what's a central decision and what's a brand level decision. I'm curious, what do you think the best kind of mix and match is of kind of central authority versus regional or brand level authority? And for example, like, did the brands pick what platform they're on? Did they decide where the marketing dollars go? So I'm curious, like, where have you seen it go right and where have you seen it gone wrong?
Incredible question. Also, so complex. Where I think that I've provided the most value and a central lens has provided the most value is the brands themselves own their brand. They know who they are best, first and foremost. And a lot of that is because their founders are still either deeply involved or that ethos runs so deep that they can't ever lose sight of that because it's ingrained in the heritage and the DNA. And that's not something that we have at a central level. However, I can look across all of these unique brands and pull out wins. Let's say I'm noticing that Kate Somerville is doing a really great job with new customer acquisition. I can then build a case study that I take to the other brands and I say, hey, listen, paid social is really important in both your early and late touch points. And in fact, we're noticing that ads that clearly articulate brand value, offer some sort of strong introductory promo, or really touching on efficacy are driving conversions across all channels. And I'm noticing that you're spending your media dollars a little bit across the funnel, which you want to have a full funnel strategy, but you're talking about innovation more than you're talking about core. You're not using TikTok as a late touch point. And I can help bring them along the journey of brands who are doing it really well, that then it doesn't feel like it's a directive that's being delivered from a central team who doesn't understand their business, but rather another business who has this unique personality, has tested and learned things that I'm sharing with them. To your point on platforms, this is where I start to get really excited because I think we have examples of this today with our UK teams. All of our UK teams have migrated to Shopify. So I now have a standard foundation in which to build on. I'm going to use Tatcha as an example. They implemented Shoplift for A/B testing. It's working really well. Now we know that all of the brands should have A/B lift as part of their Shopify stack, right? In the United States, it's a little bit more all over the map. We have some folks on Salesforce Commerce Cloud. We have some folks on Shopify. And so I would love everyone to eventually move over to Shopify. And I think that could and should be a central decision of, hey, this is the future. This is what your stack could look like. Here's the success we're already seeing. This is how I project you would expect to see, an increase in revenue or conversion or whatever your metrics are. There's also complexities of, I'm thinking about Paula's Choice being this behemoth, probably one of the first D2C skincare brands. All of these global markets, driving hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue a year. It's not as simple for them to migrate to Shopify. So a central decision might be helping them flush out that roadmap and breaking it down into milestones. So I think there's a give and take of where it makes sense for us. I would never say dictate, but help drive and support the decision making. The last thing I'll make a note on, because I think this is where some rub happens, is marketing decisions. The brands own and operate their businesses, right? They hire the best of the best marketing leads. There are instances where, from a central lens, we've seen enough brands try things. I'm going to use celebrities as an example, that maybe we would say, actually, it's not, the bang is not worth the buck, or the buck is not happening here. So instead of going after this big celebrity partnership, you might want to think about micros or nanos, or we have this other recommendation, because if they're not talking to each other, they might just see, oh, Living Proof had Paris Hilton we want to do something big and flashy like that. And it's like, okay, but was that actually the right investment? Or are you just looking at that as an example of what seems like it's great, but you don't have the knowledge or the context that it was a good or not a great decision?
And this might be a complex question. So please let me know if I'm not articulating myself well. We've seen recently, and there's a bit of a left turn here, that like Salesforce has kind of moved part of their strategy just as a business for a second, where they've made a lot of acquisitions, but it wasn't really integrated that well. Their words, not mine. And in the era where everything's moving towards AI, where like data cleanliness is really key, do you think that in skincare and luxury, folks can really nail personalization without sharing information across brands?
No. I don't know if this is a hot take, but my answer is no. I think that we learn best from each other, and the term personalization has almost become slightly triggering to me, because it's like everyone talks about personalization. They're personalizing this and they're personalizing that. And it's like, well, is it really personalized, or is it just the baseline, what customers have come to expect when they drop on your site? And then how are you taking it a bit further? You know, in skincare, we have quizzes. We want to ask you about your skin type. We want to recommend products that make sense to you. At Daily Harvest, you have unique dietary restrictions, or you have specific allergens you need to steer clear of, or you have taste preferences. How do we co-create to make sure that the products that you see on the digital shelf make sense for your life and the way that you eat and the times that you eat and the type of food that is? That has to be one-to-one communication and conversation, and that would happen in each brand. But there are probably themes that bubble up that we need to share across, of ways in which folks are engaging with personalization or what they've come to expect, because all of our sites can have a quiz, and that can be AI driven, right? And they don't really need to talk to anyone about the quiz. They're like, oh, well, this is what customers are using. And, you know, we see that be a retention driver, and we know that helps retain customers and increase LTV. But like, what's next? You know, you just have 10 sites with 10 quizzes. What's the quiz 2.0? AI can't tell us that. We need to talk to each other and figure out, how do we take this a step further? Is it a chatbot? Is it a loyalty program where we're delivering content to your inbox based off of your results? So I don't think that you can do personalization well if you're not sharing learnings across. I don't know that personalization is a only me thing. I think it's like a me and people like me thing.
Well, I think the example I would give, right, is, let's say I was working at the floor in a Nordstrom. Someone comes in, I get to know them over time. I get to learn, like you said, maybe they have an allergy, they have a preference, and there's 10 different brands that I could kind of bring them towards, right? In theory, if they're all under the same portfolio, like Unilever, I would have that information and I could effectively help cross-sell across different types of brands. I feel like, to your point, in the absence of having almost like a unified, maybe I'm oversimplifying, a unified customer ID that kind of is felt across the different brands, I feel like it's a missed opportunity, because every time you kind of go on, you have 10 different data sources that are kind of siloed from each other in this theoretical example. So I'm curious to see, I know it's a hot take, and I actually know that most of the luxury fashion brands are staying away from this.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense when you consider their point of view, right? They're competitors. It's like, why do they want to share learnings? They're competing against each other. Like, we don't want you to know what we're doing. But I think there's a way to share that you can still keep what makes you unique and different, and not, give it all away. That is still a way to learn. I mean, if none of us shared, we wouldn't know anything. Like, the only reason I know something is because I learned it from someone else, right? So there's got to be a little bit of that in the luxury space. And I also think that luxury is going to change a ton over the next couple of years, especially with the advances in AI. And I know that this was a topic of conversation at Shop Talk Fall, which was, does human touch actually become luxury in the future, where everything is automated, everything is already personalized. They have all of the data about you. You don't even have to add things to your cart anymore. They've already done it. So is the luxury experience that you are still going to a salon and getting a facial and someone's touching and feeling your skin? Like, how do we bring some of that one-to-one back into the experience digitally is what I'm focusing on for sure.
Would you rather your portfolio companies in the luxury space cut their costs to try and meet their sales forecasts, or just hold firm on the price and potentially miss? How are you folks looking at that from a high level?
What a question, Caitlin. It's tough. It's tough. We have some brands in the portfolio who absolutely do not discount, do not promo, do not participate on Amazon Turkey 12, which is happening right now. And they still drive sales because they've positioned themselves in a place in the market where you're going to buy no matter what. I know you mentioned that you work with Cartier. I think about them all the time. Like, you're not buying a love bracelet because it's 5% off. You're buying a love bracelet because you want that thing on your wrist and you want everyone to see that you have it. We also have some brands in the portfolio that don't have the luxury of that positioning in the market. And so in order to get there eventually, as you know, an aspiration, they do need to discount, they do need to promo. So we really take it on a brand by brand basis. And of course, it depends what the goals are. And if we think we could make it up in other months and we have other activations going on, campaigns, new product innovations launching. But yeah, it's tricky.
How do you measure brand dilution? Can you?
I think that we certainly can. It's something that it's interesting you asked this. We just ran an analysis. We were looking at search trends on Google across some of our competitors, Paula's Choice, Inky List, CeraVe, La Roche-Posay, kind of like across price points. And you notice everyone starting to decline across the board. Everyone's declining a bit. And then it's like, all right, well, how do we maintain? How do we decline a little bit less? Because we obviously see trends in the overall market, and then we compare how are we pacing against those trends, and are we actually already beneath the trend? If skincare is declining and like one of our brands is already all the way down, like that's not great. We have a brand problem. But if it's like everyone's declining and we're still actually like a little bit flat, okay, that's helpful knowledge. So it's really kind of a compare and contrast game. I think that the most difficult part about our business is maintaining a brand identity, and knowing that you want to reach new customers and acquire new customers and remain relevant, but still hold true to your brand. So when you think about brand dilution, is it that you were playing on price and now you're just being outpriced? The only reason someone would return to your brand and pay more is because of your brand, right? So that brand piece remains really, really important to continuously look at and improve. And like I mentioned earlier, make 1% better, but it's not a science. It's very much a art and science that I would assume everyone probably struggles with a little bit.
I would agree. I think what's crazy, and we could wrap here, is if you map out the enterprise value of publicly traded retail businesses, the ones that have stayed away consistently over time from discounting have the highest enterprise value. And it's a very interesting take. Obviously, that completely removes the Walmart, the Amazons from the world, right? So like removing that, I'm talking about like unless your competitive advantage is cheaper and better, right? So like an Amazon or a Walmart, the enterprise values have effectively degraded. And I don't want to call anyone out specifically, but like anyone who kind of got hooked on that consistent discounting is reflective in their stock prices.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I mean, we have Hourglass in our portfolio, such a strong brand. If you close your eyes and someone says Hourglass, you see the palettes, you see the artwork, you can almost feel the color. And they don't discount, they don't promo on Amazon T12, they're not participating, they're crushing it. Everyone wants a palette for Christmas. They don't care if it's 5, 10, 15% off. But yeah, it doesn't work across the board. So it's interesting to see how this will play out, especially, filming this podcast now during almost what's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, when everything is on sale. It's a big topic.
No, absolutely. Well, Alexis, this was a pleasure. Really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much for jumping on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The E-commerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the E-commerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.